Hi, everyone. We are looking in this chapter at verbal communications. And in this chapter, we will talk about the role of verbal communication and how words work. We'll also discuss how meanings are determined. We'll talk about the language environment, inappropriate language, styles, roles, and group memberships, speaking and writing, and how you can work on your own communication. So, how do words work? Well, words and meanings are two different things. Words are just symbols of meanings. So some meanings are denotative, which means a dictionary type meaning. Some are connotative, which are really subjective. And here's an example of that. If I say tree, maybe you in your mind picture a pine tree. Maybe in your mind, you picture a Christmas tree. Maybe in December, you might picture a Christmas tree. Some people might picture an oak tree, or maybe not even a particular kind of tree at all. Maybe it's a dead tree with a hole in the middle and a squirrel sticking his head out, whatever your idea of a tree is. So whatever you think of when you hear the word tree is your connotation of that word. The dictionary meaning of tree is very specific. I looked it up. It's a woody perennial plant that grows to a height of several feet and typically has a single erect main stem with side branches. So yeah, that works as a definition for a tree. So in that particular example, I think it's easy to see that people determine meanings. Words don't determine meanings. Meanings are determined based on several things. Usually culture has a big role in it. The age, the location of a person. Be sure to watch the video that talks about the differences between soda and pop. So be sure to watch that in relation to this topic as well. But meanings ultimately are determined by people. That's why young people today say that something is fire when what they're really saying is that it's hot, according to people from my generation. And so just to kind of prove this point, for the rest of this class, the word shoe is a celebratory word that we recognize with woo. So I know you're listening to this on your own and it may feel rather ridiculous, but when I say shoe, I want you to say woo. So shoe. Woo! There we go. Let's keep that up. Okay, so before we get to another example, I want to show you this because I think it's hilarious. It's the semantic triangle that's explained by a square. Ta-da, there we have it. That's pretty confusing, right? Basically what it means is you hear a word, or maybe you think a word. This is you speaking. You want to send a message and you have a meaning that you intend to share. So you put it into thoughts, you encode it into phrasing that you know and understand. And in your mind, you have a symbol for that, you share it, and then your listener hears it and they have to decode it. Then you have to determine, as the original speaker, whether you're on the same page or not. Now, most of the time, we don't think about this kind of stuff. If we did, we'd never have time to actually say anything because we would actually be taking this step by step by step. This is something that happens intuitively for us, but it's important for you to kind of get that this thought process exists so you can see that it's really people who determine word meanings. Remember, when I say the word shoe, woo! That's your response, okay? So, my referent, let's see. My referent is that I see this cute shoe and I want to tell you about it. Seeing the shoe, my intended meaning, reminds me of something, makes me realize something. I love this shoe. It's cute. It's my favorite colors. This hot pink and hot green, and it's got some orange on it too. My 3 favorite colors, actually. So I see this cute shoe. Ooh, shoe. Woo! Here we go. We're going to say it a couple of times now. We're behind. So seeing this shoe, you realize something. I don't wear these shoes because they're uncomfortable. So I sum up my thoughts about these shoes using language that I know. And so the language I know, I select the right words to express my thought. And I say to you, I saw some pink and green thongs today that were so cute, but way too uncomfortable to wear. And your response then may be, what? What is she talking about? Because of our age difference. When I was a kid growing up, these shoes were called thongs because a thong is a thin strap, and flip-flops have a thin strap. So these shoes that were called thongs 40 years ago are now called flip-flops. And there's a generation of people who don't know that. So it's important to choose your words wisely. So you can stop with the shoe thing now. That was kind of the fun thing that I get out of this. So you don't have to do that anymore. But people determine meanings, and meanings change over time, which is, again, fire. I hate to keep going back to that, but the first time I heard it, I thought that doesn't even work in a sentence. There's a word missing when you say something is fire. That seems to me like there's something missing, but it's because I'm from a different generation and we have different means of communication. So it's important to remember that people determine meanings of words, or words don't determine their own meanings. So elements of your language environment also impact the way you communicate verbally. So if you're communicating with people like your grandmother, you might talk to her differently than you would talk to your friends. And you might talk to your preacher or priest differently. You might talk to people differently based on their purpose too. Like if you actually are in a relationship, maybe the beginning of a relationship, when you say sweet things to each other all the time, then you have a purpose. Your purpose is to woo this person. Woo is probably one of those words that your generation doesn't use. But anyway, trying to schmooze or, trying to get to know them. So you're trying to win them over. A nurse might say, this is going to sting just a little bit, as she pulls out a huge needle. And of course, road rage has its own kind of language environment too. Language that's probably not appropriate for us to share here. So the rules of communication vary in the way that they achieve their purpose. So people have different methods of communication, they have different words to communicate with. And like I have this example here of a text message. What time or what are you doing for lunch, and what time is or was your eye appointment? My eye appointment is 1:30. I was going to eat a frozen dinosaur I thought I had here, but apparently I already did and forgot, or someone stole it. Autocorrect, right? I mean, we have to become masters now of interpreting what each other is trying to text when we do text. And then I also included this list of words here that have at one point or another been part of kind of young people vocabulary, like rad or wild. That's so wild, which could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing. Tight, hot, sweet, sick, funky, dope. You can see how all these words have different meanings. Superfly. Superfly. Haven't thought of that in years. So ritual language takes place in environments where a recognized response is expected. If a teacher walks into a classroom and says, "Good morning, class," the ritual language that's expected in return is, "Good morning, teacher," or whatever that teacher's name is. It's the same kind of thing if I walk up to you and say, "Hi, how are you?" Chances are I really do care that you're doing okay, because I'm kind of cool like that. But typically, ritual language expects that you'll say, "Fine, how are you?" And the conversation often ends there. So that's all we're talking about when we say ritual language. Euphemisms. Okay, now these links are really important. You've got to watch the euphemism phrase about objectionable words. So euphemisms are words that replace an unpleasant word to make it seem nicer. Like in this particular video that I share with you, the comedian, as horrible as it is to say, he's really got some great ideas though. He shares the idea that we've changed words like shell shock, which was a phrase used, I guess, World War II era to explain that kind of trauma, that post-war trauma that soldiers had to deal with. And he talks about its evolution from shell shock to post-traumatic stress disorder. It kind of softens the blow, if you will. Doublespeak are words that are deliberately constructed and misconstrued a little bit for political purposes. They always relate to a political agenda. And I love this example for doublespeak too, so please be sure to watch it because it really shows how politicians tend to think that if they just say something enough, people will either believe it or forget and move on. Inappropriate language. Now, if you were hoping that we would use some, if you were going to learn some new words to yell during road rage, then we can't do that here. But I will mention types of inappropriate language. Racist language is always inappropriate. I've got links in the slides that you're welcome to look at that lead you to articles about Band-Aids that were always sold as flesh colored, but they were always kind of this kind of a tannish kind of color. So they didn't match all flesh. So the use of the word flesh colored kind of created this idea that the best flesh was a particular color. So that was considered, and now we have different colors of adhesive strips that we can use for Band-Aids. And baby dolls too. There's a video about the baby dolls. You should really watch that too. I'll include it in your lecture notes as well. The idea that children pick up racial cues so early in life. And I think that we're seeing that that's improving too as time goes on and as our society continues to grow and to be more accepting. And it just takes a lot of time sometimes to make changes in a society. Sexist language is also inappropriate. I'm not talking specifically about calling all women baby or, something like that. I'm talking about the language of fireman, policeman. That should be firefighter and police officer, or a mailman is a letter carrier or a postal employee. So watch that kind of language. Also ableist language. And that's something that seems to be a little more accepted sometimes, and it really shouldn't be. We should be more cautious with that. If we call someone nuts, or if we say that someone is dumb or something is lame, I mean, these are all things that refer to disabilities. And for that reason, they are inappropriate language to use. And you shouldn't use those in any of your speeches this semester. So just to go back here, blind would be visually impaired, deaf would be hearing impaired, just to throw those out for you. Also, style is the way you select and arrange words and sentences. Style can impact someone's opinion of you, and styles are also connected with the roles you play. I'm going to change my style if I am lecturing in a classroom, and it's going to be very different from the way I talk to my friends or the way I talk to my husband or my daughter. Style, the best example of style always is Snoop Dogg, because he really does have such an impact on language, and he creates his own language. I mean, he fascinates me because he reinvents himself time and time again. And you do not have a team assignment, but you will have a similar assignment listed for you in your discussion for the week. Yep. So in terms of gender and language, since sensitivity to gender and language is important because it affects your thoughts and your actions. It has an impact on the way other people think of you. It impacts your social reality. It can impact someone else's self-esteem. And it affects the empowerment of both genders. Powerful talk comes directly to the point. Powerful talk doesn't hesitate. It doesn't use qualifiers. It doesn't add questions or disclaimers. It's powerful talk is me saying, don't do that. If a student pulls out their phone in class and I can tell that they are clearly playing on their phone, they're not using it to take notes, and if that's against my rules, powerful talk is me saying, put that phone away. Boom, no hesitation, no qualifiers, no, hey, if you're not doing schoolwork with that phone, you need to put it up. Or, hey, are you doing some schoolwork with that phone? No, just powerful talk, just coming straight to the point. It's being blunt. Dialect is the habitual language of a community, and it's distinguished by different grammatical structures, words, and figures of speech. We all have a dialect, no matter how hard we may try to get rid of it. Southern dialect is very specific and very recognizable as well. My niece studied acting, and she thought it would be very important for her to get rid of her Southern accent, her Southern dialect. And so when she went to school in the Northeast, they said, we thought you said you were from Arkansas. And she said, I am from Arkansas. And they said, you don't sound like you're from Arkansas. You need to get your dialect back. And she never could because she worked too hard to get rid of it. So I mentioned to you guys before that my first degree was in broadcast, and the ideal dialect for broadcast is a Midwestern dialect. It's one that is seen as the least nasal, the least drawl, if you will. So we had to shoot for the Midwestern dialect. So, you know, if I have my radio voice is different from my normal talking voice. So, you know, that's part of dialect too. And these are some examples of dialect. We won't go into those individually. So speaking and writing. Speaking is more transactional. You get feedback when you're speaking to someone. You get to exchange right away your thoughts as well. It's easy to change your language if you need to, depending on the circumstances. I find this is true, especially in talking with students from other countries, like international students. Maybe I talk too fast or maybe I talk too slow, and I can see that they need me to either speed up or slow down, and I can gauge that if I'm speaking to them, but I can't gauge whether or not they understand my writing if they're reading. Can also include paralanguage. I can shift a pitch or whatever needs to be done if I'm speaking, but if I'm writing, I can't change my written language, especially right then. And we've already seen that I have different, based on my culture, I have different meanings for words than some of you guys do. So if I can't change that at a moment's notice, then, you know, you will be left with a different message than the one I intended. So how do you work on your communication? Well, honestly, it's just mostly about being clear and being vivid. Ask yourself, what is it that you want to say? What message do you want to send? Can you send that message ethically? Who are you going to talk to? And when you know who you're going to talk to, then you can form this message directly for them. And that covers our unit on verbal communication.